The economics of thirst. Follow the money and the story makes sense. Bottled water is a cheap input wrapped in an expensive idea. The liquid costs pennies. The margin lives in branding, distribution, and the promise that you're doing something wise in a world that feels careless. A plant can fill tens of thousands of bottles an hour. Freight moves them by the pallet. The highest cost on that pallet often isn't the water. It's the plastic, the fuel, and the marketing that makes you pick that label over the one below it. A former route driver told me his bonus depended on eye level. If he won the shelf at your grocery, dead center, hand height, his brand moved. If he slipped to the ankle zone, cases stacked up. The same water in a different spot was suddenly less pure. You weren't buying composition, you were buying position. Brand stories add price like altitude adds prestige. Imported water rides farther on a truck, then a ship, then another truck. The carbon math is absurd, but the markups are tidy. Shipping water across oceans isn't rational hydration. It's luxury theater with pallets and forklifts. The bottle becomes a lifestyle prop, a table ornament, a signal. Entire categories thrive on that signal alone. Behind the label, contracts do quiet work. At schools, a beverage company wins exclusivity. That means the vending machines glow with cold singles, the fountains get finicky sensors, and the refill stations depend on how public pressure played out at a board meeting 3 years ago. Kids become recurring revenue. If a refill bottle costs $12 and a cold single costs $2, habit decides who profits. Then there are the water rights that make locals grind their teeth. A company leases land, taps a spring, pays a fee that sounds big in a council meeting, and hauls millions of gallons a year. It's only a fraction of the aquifer, the consultant says. Renewable. Residents watch tanker trucks roll past dusty wells and feel the math in their bones. The town budget gets a check. The aquifer gets a bill that posts quietly. Externalities hide on other ledgers. Plastic waste doesn't show up in the per-bottle price. It shows up at the materials recovery facility that can't actually recover most of what arrives, in the landfill tipping fee paid by a city 2 years from now, in the county's vote to expand a cell by another acre. Trucking emissions don't show up on the grocery receipt. They show up in particulate maps and asthma stats, far from alpine fun. Meanwhile, a parallel business hums in your kitchen: filters. The subscription cartridge model is a razor and blade classic. Pitchers and undersink housings are affordable. The money flows when you forget the calendar and the light turns red, or worse, when it should have turned red but didn't. Some companies are honest about capacity and replacement. Others sell peace of mind and leave the details to footnotes. A renter named Darius learned to read those footnotes the hard way. He bought a sleek countertop unit with pods that clicked in like coffee capsules. Month 3, a slow taste change crept in. He checked the app. Filter at 62%. He sent a sample to a lab out of stubborn curiosity. Chlorine was gone. The PFAS his city had flagged barely moved. He switched to a certified carbon block with clear capacity numbers, then added a small RO system on the counter. Landlord said no drilling. He didn't. He ran a line to a pitcher. His follow-up lab showed real cuts. The cost per gallon fell under a dime. The plastic recycling bin lost weight. Households doing that math discover a quiet truth. The cheapest, cleanest water over a year usually isn't in a single-serve bottle. It's in a system you maintain. But you have to buy the right thing, match it to your source, and keep up with it. That's not as photogenic as a glacier on a label. It's more honest. On the corporate side, investor decks brag about premiumization. That's code for charging more for the same molecule with a better story. Add electrolytes for taste, sell a sleeker cap, print a new badge about pH, and the case price climbs. Consumers feel proactive. Balance sheets feel proud. Regulators don't touch adjectives unless someone sues. Microplastics complicate the ledger further. Every mile in a hot truck, every scrape on a bottling line, every twist of a cap adds invisible particles you didn't budget for. Studies counting down to the nanoplastic range estimate staggering particle loads per liter. You don't see them on a label. You pay for them somewhere else. Maybe in a filter you add later, maybe in a study your taxes fund, maybe in a gut that wonders why it's irritated. Zoom out and the economics of thirst look like this. Sell fear, sell convenience, sell status, then sell the fix for the problems those sales create. Cases fill closets because a boil notice once wrecked a week. Pitchers fill fridges because cases started to feel heavy and hypocritical. Cities plan carbon changeouts because lawsuits landed. Each move creates a market for the next. There's a better math. Spend once on a system that works for your source. Share a refill culture that actually refills. No exclusivity, no vending trap. Hold bottlers and utilities to data, not stories. The cheapest gallon is the one that doesn't need a truck or a lawsuit to feel safe. What actually works at home? Even if you're angry at the shelves and the pipes, false hope at home can make things worse. Real fixes exist, but they only work when they match your water. Start with this: know your source. If you're on a city system, pull your latest consumer confidence report and look for the special notices: PFAS advisories, disinfectant byproducts, nitrates, lead and copper rounds. If you're on a private well, skip the guessing and order a lab kit with chain of custody. You want a baseline, not a vibe. Here, S where the one-size-fits-all pitch breaks. Technologies are tools, not talismans. A simple granular carbon pitcher can help with taste, chlorine, and some organics, but it's not a guaranteed PFAS solution. If you want performance you can bank on, look for certified carbon blocks, not loose granules, with enough bed depth and a clear capacity rating. The label should name the standard, the reduction claim, and the gallon limit before changeout. If it just says fresh taste, it's selling comfort, not chemistry. Reverse osmosis is the workhorse when you need broad removal. It forces water through a semi-permeable membrane fine enough to be annoying in a good way. Paired with carbon pre- and post-filters, RO cuts many PFAS, nitrates, arsenic, and a raft of other dissolved stuff. You'll waste some water in the process. Modern systems manage the ratio better than older ones, but you should still plan for concentrate going down the drain. For apartments, countertop RO units exist. No drilling, no landlord battles. They're slower than undersink systems, but honest about it. Ion exchange is the sniper. In home units, resins can target specific charged molecules, including certain PFAS. You'll see it as a specialty cartridge in a multi-stage system or as a dedicated canister. The catch: capacity. Once the resin fills up, performance slides and you won't taste it. That's why the change schedule matters more than the unboxing thrill. A calendar beats intuition. Here's a micro story from a renter who couldn't touch the plumbing. Maya lived on the 3rd floor, old building, suspicious pipes. Her city's report flagged PFAS detections just under proposed limits. She bought a faucet filter that promised clean taste. Then she spent a small chunk of rent on a mail-in PFAS test after filtration. The numbers barely moved. She returned it, bought a compact countertop RO with a carbon block and a small ion exchange stage, and ran the output to glass bottles. 2 weeks later, her follow-up lab showed the kind of cuts you can feel in a report, not on your tongue. Her landlord never noticed. Her budget did. Maintenance is the truth serum. Every filter has a curve. Strong early, then a plateau, then decline. You don't want to ride the cliff. Track gallons if your unit estimates them well. If it only tracks time, set reminders with wiggle room. Low pressure at the sink can wreck RO performance. Check for kinks, keep pre-filters fresh, and don't shove the system behind paint can. If your water is very hard, a small softener cartridge before an RO membrane can protect it. But remember, softeners swap ions, they don't clean PFAS. Different tool, different job. If you're on a private well, build a different plan. You need a broad test panel first: microbials, nitrates, metals, and yes, PFAS if you live near airports, fire training sites, landfills, textile plants, or mysterious industrial parks. Shock chlorination can reset microbes, but it won't touch PFAS. Whole house carbon can help odor and some chemicals for showers and laundry. Point-of-use RO or certified carbon blocks at the kitchen handle what you swallow. If a lab flags a specific metal or pesticide, choose media designed for it. Guessing is expensive. About pitchers and refrigerator filters. Some are legit, some are theater. A solid block pitcher certified for PFAS reduction with a published capacity and flow rate is a different animal than a fast flow mesh that mostly changes taste. Your fridge filter might be great for chlorine and particles, but useless for PFAS unless the manual says otherwise with a standard to match. Read past the marketing paragraph to the spec table. If there is no spec table, that's your answer. Storage matters more than people think. Heat accelerates plastic shedding and can degrade filters waiting on a shelf. Keep replacements cool and dry in their packaging. Store finished water in glass or stainless steel, not a sun-baked case in a trunk. Wash reusable bottles gently. Abrasion creates microplastics you don't want to drink. Replace caps and seals when they crack. Verification closes the loop. If PFAS was your worry, test before and after install once. You don't need to do it monthly. You need to confirm your setup did what the box claimed. Keep the report next to the maintenance schedule. If your city upgrades treatment, retest and adjust, you might be able to simplify. If your city publishes PFAS dashboards, watch trends the way you watch the weather. No panic, just pattern. Money math tilts toward home systems fast. A solid undersink RO with carbon stages or a certified carbon block system, plus one PFAS-focused cartridge can bring your cost per gallon down below a dime after a few months. You'll haul fewer cases, shed less plastic, and stop playing label roulette. For travel, toss a small squeeze filter with a carbon stage in your bag. Airport fountains taste like victory when you trust your kit. The win isn't purity, it's lower exposure with proof. Test, match tech to your water, maintain it, and verify once. That's the path out of panic and into a routine that works whether headlines are calm or loud. Inside the utility, limits and levers. From the utilities side of the meter, every day starts with numbers. In a control room that hums like a library of pumps, a screen tracks flows, pressures, chlorine residuals, turbidity spikes, UV intensity, and alarms that blink when a parameter edges toward a line. Operators pull grab samples at dawn, noon, and night. They run bench tests that smell like high school chemistry and boredom. Most days, the graphs behave. Some days, they don't. Daily testing is a rhythm for the basics. Disinfectant levels, pH, temperature, cloudiness. Monthly brings coliform rounds. Quarterly stack on metals. Lead and copper get special sampling at kitchen taps in homes built when regulations were looser, because service lines and solder hide in walls and yards. Emerging contaminants like PFAS, that's where the calendar thinned. The utility might test quarterly or semi-annually under a special program or a state order, then wait for a contract lab to confirm parts per trillion data that can wobble with methods and shipping times. It's not apathy. It's bandwidth and budgets meeting lab capacity. Meanwhile, under the streets, the weak link isn't the plant, it's the pipe. Miles of cast iron, ductile iron, PVC, and the occasional mystery alloy carry water through soil that shifts with seasons and truck vibrations. Joints slip, biofilm forms. A hydrant hit by a car can reverse a pressure zone long enough to stir rust and sediment into a brown rush that has nothing to do with safety and everything to do with old metal. Operators chase those ghosts by opening hydrants to flush neighborhoods at 3 a.m., hoping to move the past out of your sink before you make coffee. Corrosion control is alchemy on a deadline. Add a phosphate blend to coat pipe interiors and keep metals from dissolving into water. Balance pH so the coating sticks. Watch alkalinity so chlorine works without making disinfection byproducts climb. Change one dial and two others twitch. The water has to be aggressive enough to be safe, gentle enough to be kind to pipes, and consistent enough that a morning slug of different chemistry doesn't strip a protective layer off a 100-year-old main. When a regulator tightens a limit or adds a contaminant, the response isn't a purchase, it's a process. Capital plans stretch in 5-year chunks. A pilot skid arrives with clear housings and sample ports, and an engineer with a clipboard measures contact time through granular activated carbon. Ion exchange columns get plumbed in parallel to compare resins. An RO pilot hisses in a corner and makes a small stream of concentrate everyone argues about. Sludge, spent carbon, and exhausted resin don't vanish. They become solid waste with PFAS or metals you now have to handle like a secret you can't keep. Where do you ship it? What landfill will take it? What does that contract look like next year? All of this lives inside bond hearings and rate cases. A director stands at a lectern and asks for a few dollars more a month per household to fund carbon changeouts and a new filter building. A council member asks why last year's money wasn't enough. A citizen asks why bottled water seems cheaper than trust. The utility publishes a slide with timelines and photos of shiny vessels. The crowd hears time. Transparency was supposed to help. Dashboards went live with color-coded gauges and PDFs with tables, but the language gap is real. PPB and PPT blur. MCL and HAA5 read like passwords. One utility tried plain language. This month, our plant removed over 90% of the PFAS we tested for. It helped until someone asked, which PFAS? How many? What about the ones you didn't test? Precision and clarity wrestle in every sentence. Meanwhile, operators carry the human weight. A woman named Tasha has run night shift for 9 years. She knows the plant by sound, the pitch of a motor that's tired, the hollow thud of a valve that didn't seat. When a storm loads the river with mud, she ups the coagulant and watches the clarifiers turn to latte. When a freeze snaps a main, she pushes pressure into a zone and texts a crew to set up a boil notice protocol they all hate but can do in their sleep. She's the reason your glass is clear most mornings. She's also the person who has to sign a report when it is. Pilot programs feel like hope and homework. A neighboring city installed deep bed GAC and saw PFAS drop below proposed limits. Your city borrows the spec, adjusts for flow, and calls vendors. The demo looks great. The invoice looks heavy. Resin bids include fine print about disposal fees if the waste stream flags above a threshold. A landfill an hour away will take it this quarter. Next quarter, maybe not. Regulations move and contracts chase them. Utilities can rebuild trust, but proof has to outrun reassurances. That means posting sample results quickly, in words a parent reads at midnight without a glossary, holding open houses where people can touch the pilot skid and ask why the membrane wastes water, mailing letters that name the numbers and the dates without hedging. It also means moving faster than the old Playbook liked, pigging mains before they color a week of sinks, swapping known lead service lines proactively, and standing in front of microphones with the chemist, not the PR team. While cities crawl, crisis hits fast. That's not an excuse, it's the reason the next chapter exists. When water fails overnight, systems rely on people who planned yesterday. Operators like Tasha can only do so much from a control room. The rest depends on how a community practices for disaster bad days mode. Long before when they water arrive. Fails overnight. 3 minutes before sunrise, the alert tone sliced through quiet kitchens. Boil water advisory. A line break on the South Trunk main had dropped pressure below safe levels overnight. In living rooms, people stared at faucets like they were strangers. Coffee plans stalled. Text threads woke up faster than the news. At the plant, Tasha was already on her second call. Pressure had recovered, but the rule is the rule. Once negative pressure is in play, you treat it like microbes got a free ride. The city's message said vigorous rolling boil 1 minute. In practice, that meant 1,000 kitchens trying to remember if steam counts. It doesn't. Rolling matters, so does patience. Hospitals didn't wait for patients. The switchboard at County General pinged the incident plan. Sterile water carts rolled toward ICUs. Nurses taped signs over ice machines. A resident who'd been up all night grabbed a coffee maker and watched it sit dry on a counter because even the coffee maker needed safe water. A supervisor radioed facilities, switched the dialysis wing to bypass, and prepped the tanker. While that was happening, pallets of bottled water became triage, not solution. A logistics chief in a reflective vest started calling contacts whose numbers lived on a dog-eared sheet. A wholesaler agreed to divert 2 trucks. A volunteer group with a borrowed forklift texted their list. The first pickup spot set cones. Cars lined up before anyone had a pallet on the ground. Ida, who ran the church pantry, told her team, 1 case per household, 4 if you have elders, no exceptions we can't defend. Across town, a dialysis center worked the problem in 10-minute chunks. Reverse osmosis is life support for those machines. When city pressure drops or quality flags, you can't just wing it. A manager named Joel had a notebook full of if this then that. Today it said call tanker, connect to port B, run inline UV and carbon, test conductivity every 15 minutes. The tanker rolled in with a driver who'd done hurricane runs. The hookup hissed, then steadied. Patients who had been told to wait got chairs. One man dozed with his hands folded like he was praying. He was exhausted. The nurse taped a smiley face on the tank valve anyway like it could bless a fitting. Meanwhile, private wells were dealing with a different kind of overnight. A wildfire 20 miles out had chewed through a canyon 2 summers ago, but the scars hide in plumbing. Heat had turned plastic laterals to mush and sent volatile compounds back through systems that looked fine from the curb. A woman named Sarah thought she'd dodged the worst. Then she poured water for her kid and smelled gasoline. The lab would later say benzene, a ghost from heat and pipe. Her neighbor had installed a gravity filter that does great work on sediments and microbes. It didn't touch benzene. No filter is magic. You need the right tool. By noon, the city had a hydrant testing crew running a route like a postal carrier. They pulled samples into sterile bottles, logged GPS, and dropped them into coolers bound for the contract lab that could turn results fast. Boil notices don't lift because of vibes. They lift because 3 rounds of samples meet a standard. The standard is dull. The relief is. In the parking lot of a high school, pallets sweated under pop-up tents. Water doesn't care about PR, but PR shows up with coolers and logos. A boutique brand's reps handed out shrink-wrapped singles with a smile. They meant well. The logistics chief waved them toward the non-priority lane. Ida's team had real triage, seniors, families with formula, caregivers with lists from home. She knew bottles were bridges, not roads. You can't pallet your way through a week. Here's a micro story from those hours that explains everything. A man walked up holding a small cooler and a note from his wife. Their baby had reflux. The formula had to be mixed a certain way, and the pediatrician had circled boiled then cooled water twice. Ida handed him a kettle from the church kitchen and pointed to the generator. They set a table. They boiled, cooled, labeled 3 jars, and sent him home with enough for 2 days. He cried when he didn't mean to. She cried too, and then kept handing out cases. In apartments, people improvised. A neighbor filled bathtubs for flushing and shared a gravity-fed setup that could handle sediment if the building plumbing belched. Someone posted a map of working refill stations. Another person reminded the thread to skip ice from before the advisory and to run dishwasher cycles on sanitize only after the notice lifted. Smart beats scared when instructions are plain. By afternoon, rumors raced. It's safe now. It was. The city posted updates every 3 hours, naming the neighborhoods, naming the steps. That mattered. People don't need perfect. They need to know where they are in the process. Boil notices feel endless until someone explains the sequence.